It was another day where, if you like understanding what WAL files are and knowing when things get committed to databases, you would have liked the middle part of the day. If you wanted to get some extra learning about physics and what happens to bodies when they are impacted, it was a disappointment. This is day 26 of the Karen Reed trial. Welcome to the Roundup, True Crime with Mike. Here I give you update to current cases so you can quickly catch up on cases and legal issues. Views and opinions expressed are my own, and this is not legal advice. Normally I talk to you in order of the witnesses as they appear, but today I'm going to go backwards. The last person that spoke today, who we only got to hear for less than an hour, was Massachusetts trooper Nicholas Garino. He specializes in computer forensics. We started with a roller coaster at the beginning of the testimony because Lally would ask if they were able to retrieve one of the pieces of data from the Lexus, and we'd hope to hear for yes, and then he would say no. Then he would be asked about the GPS from the Lexus, and the answer was no. The software couldn't read anything from the informatics system in the car, so we can't use anything from it to know where Karen's car went that day. Next was the computers retrieved from the house. A laptop and PC were brought from it. He said that it appeared that the kids used the PC and John had his own laptop. He said the Ring application wasn't on either PC or the laptop and said that it was on John's phone. So then we got into John and Karen's cell phones. Garina talked about when they gathered the cell phones from John and Karen respectively, they put the phones in airplane mode so that they couldn't be wiped remotely. Then they put them in Faraday bags and hooked them up to power supplies to keep the charge. Then he explained how it took several months for the software to be able to be used on her phone, and then once it was hooked up, it took a while to get the passcode with their software. He said they were able to get in. The focus then changed to the messages that John and Karen exchanged on the 28th of January. We didn't get very far into it when the day ended, and it ended with Lally starting to introduce some of the other chats with other people. But we did get to see some of the chats from that day, and it started with Karen talking about the fight from the morning. She asked if John was still interested in her, and John said things hadn't been good for a while. And then in the middle of the day, one of the messages sent by John was, "Stop calling him." She called him like 20 times in the 2 p.m. hour. 14 of them were rejected. Then we got to the end of the day. The second witness for the day was Ian Whiffen from Cellebrite. Cellebrite is a company that has software that performs cell phone extraction for police departments. It turns what is on the phone into reports. The question that he was asked by was the infamous Jan McCabe search of how's hose long to die in the cold. The defense wants the search to be at 2:27 a.m. and the state says it happened at 6:24. Let's hear his conclusion.
Totality of your analysis, Mr. Whiffen, what, if any, conclusions did you come to as to the timing of the two searches in question with relation to what you observed in your analysis and testing of this device?
Yes. So, in conclusion, I determined that the tab that was used was focused at 2:27:40. So the tab was opened at that time, at which point it was being used to show Ozone Basketball and Hockomock Sports websites. The 6:23 timestamp is when the search was first conducted. Never loaded the page, otherwise there'd be a record in the history database. And while that page was still loading, a secondary search was conducted for Hoss Long to Die in the Cold. Again, that page never loaded either, although these both did show up in the Knowledge C database to show that the browser was trying to display these pages. Safari was closed prior to the Hoss Long to Die in the Cold record being shown on screen at all. But when it was reopened at 10:33, in regards to whatever other Safari activity was to be conducted, it appeared on screen. So we have a 10:33 record where Hoss Long to Die in the Cold was shown on screen, even though the page never successfully loaded.
And with respect to your analysis and your testing here, what, if any, opinion do you have as to whether or not any of the data marked as deleted was actually user deleted, or a user actually actively went through the process of deleting the data?
Yeah. So again, we know that she didn't, we know that nobody deleted the entire history. So that leaves the only option to be selectively deleting records. The fact that there are no missing records in HistoryDB shows that it's impossible that that record could have been deleted by the user. It would have just been orphaned in the database, and I believe would have deleted itself at some stage whenever a particular cleanup function ran. Although, as I said earlier, I haven't been able to replicate that. I was able to continue to read the various versions of the page that contained Hoss Long to Die in the Cold browser state record, and found that it existed at the same time as another record that was created at least 2 days later. Therefore, I can determine that that particular record was not deleted until at the earliest, 10 p.m. on the 31st of January. And that it's not possible that the user could have created or caused that deletion to occur.
The testimony was several hours long and went over Google searches, WAL files, which databases are used, and if things were deleted. In Ian's mind, he said the searches happened at 6:23 and 6:24, which is what Jen McCabe said. He said that the search results didn't show up in the history database, so the searches weren't actually completed. So that's two experts who have said that she didn't search it until after 6 in the morning. We will most likely see a defense expert on the issue. The two later witnesses were good for the Commonwealth, but the first one was not. The day started with Trooper Joseph Paul finishing up his direct and then being crossed. On Friday, Paul talked about the testing on the Lexus and seeing the data that showed Karen's car backing up at 24 miles per hour. There were several areas that Paul failed on. First was that he didn't have any specific drawings or animations showing what they believed happened in the accident, so no visualizations for the jury. Second, Paul didn't understand the physics enough to explain what happened. There was talk about kinematics and the area of physics about bodies in motion. And the other one, which is a bigger issue, was the key cycles from the data. So we know from Paul's testing what the key cycle was that he tested the car with and that the mileage it was at. There were key cycles that were 36 miles before that showed a 3-point turn and the reversing at high speeds. But it was only 2 key cycles prior. The argument is that there should have been more key cycles, which were where the tow truck driver drove the car on and off the truck, Karen driving to pick up Jen, and then driving to her dad's house. So there is a big question of why those weren't recorded. On redirect, Lally asked if he went with miles instead of key cycles, and he said yes. And that Paul thought that the key cycles shut up when there was only trigger events and not all turns of the key. So the day started with a witness that was overwhelmed on the stand and didn't portray enough confidence in his conclusions. He wasn't ready for the physics. It's hard for us to remember back to those physics classes when we learned how bodies react when being hit. However, this is an area that can be explained a little bit. When two bodies collide, the momentum is going to be maintained and it will be transferred. People can argue with my quick math, but the momentum of a car with 7,300 pounds going 24 miles per hour and then loses 0.5 miles per hour is losing about 3,650 pounds per mile per hour momentum. With John weighing like 225 pounds and dividing that into 3,650, you get like under 17 miles per hour velocity going into his body. It is a weird measure, but that means his body is absorbing the force. But with John's body being more of the side, that force is going to go into a combination of both pushing and twisting him. So John's body is going to both move forward some with the car, but also rotate counterclockwise. I'm not quite sure how to calculate how much. Physics was a long time ago. But for the second issue of key cycles, that's a big issue that should have been addressed. It should have been looked at into in questions asked. One of the issues with Jackson is that when people are always barking on cross, people won't know what is important because you're always barking. Tomorrow is a voir dire day, so the jury is not in court tomorrow. Wednesday is a holiday, so court resumes on Thursday, where we will hear more of the messages that Karen sent that day. Thank you for listening to an episode of The Roundup. Be safe out there, and remember, don't do anything bad that will end up on one of my episodes.